So a criticism I've seen towards Insomniac Spider-Man is the idea that he needed a suit to defeat Doc Ock, as if this undermines his capabilities as an experienced Spider-Man, even comparing him to the comics or other iterations as a way of criticizing this version. But to me, this reasoning is fairly shallow because even in the comics, Peter had to use his smarts to find a method of countering Doc Ock's arms in his first story with him. Peter lost the first time, then had to find a scientific solution to counter Doc Ock the second time. This really isn't any different from the PS4 game, where he lost to Doc Ock for the first time, then used a scientific solution the second time. Now I know some people are going to say that the moment in the comics is excusable because Peter was early into his career, and in the game he has been Spider-Man for up to 8 years. And this actually is a point I've seen in response to this being brought up. First of all, experience is not remotely pivotal if you're fighting Doc Ock for the first time. The reason for this is because Doc Ock is one of Spider-Man's most intelligent and unpredictable villains. No level of experience can prepare you for someone like Doc Ock when you haven't fought him before. Second of all, I'm willing to admit that this isn't fully equivalent. Part of the reason is that Peter has a greater disadvantage in the game than he does in the comic. Doc Ock planned this ahead of time so he specifically could weaken Spider-Man. That's why he had the Sinister Six beat him up before Doc Ock gave his final warning to stay out of his way. And in doing so, this resulted in Peter having 14 broken bones.
The doctor said you still have 14 broken bones.
If Peter had 14 broken bones alongside an unhealthy lack of sleep, then he's inherently depowered compared to the comic version, who didn't sustain those same injuries. And this was entirely by Doc Ock's design. He wanted to weaken Spider-Man so he'd have a hard time stopping him. And before Spider-Man even fights Doc Ock for the first time, he's already fatigued by numerous fights. He had to fight Electro and the Vulture at the same time, where he'd constantly have to dodge lightning and the Vulture's fast-moving wings. Constantly moving around makes your injuries even worse, so I can only imagine the consequences of that while having 14 broken bones.
I hate it when they team up. Just need to catch my breath.
He then had to fight the Scorpion, who managed to stab Spider-Man and drop a poison in his system. Peter had to save himself before he proceeded to take on the Rhino and the Scorpion at the same time. And after that, he had to face the demons, the Sable agents, then had to fight Mr. Negative at his most powerful state. After all of that, Peter still won those fights. If anything, Doc Ock is cheating by throwing this much at Peter before actually fighting him himself. He chooses immediately after the final Mr. Negative boss fight to attack Peter, and even then, he doesn't go down immediately. He's resisting against Doc Ock and puts up a decent fight, so the odds are actually even worse in the PS4 version. He literally has more obstacles to deal with before facing Doc Ock. I think that's a pretty fair reason for him to resort to the Anti-Ock suit. And I actually have seen someone address this by saying Peter beat tougher people while heavily injured worse, so that's not an excuse.
What? What are you talking about?
So first of all, even if that's true in the comics, this is Spider-Man in the Insomniac game. This is not Spider-Man in the comics. Now, the only comic example I've seen provided was Peter getting burnt to a crisp, yet he's still alive and fully recovers. But as Alex here rightfully points out, he's completely bandaged because of how bad the injury is. He's literally shown to be in a wheelchair, which is not something Insomniac Spider-Man ever needed in the game, but that's fine. I don't have an issue with him needing a wheelchair in this case. But the thing is, if Peter was burnt to a crisp like that would be a completely legitimate reason for Doc Ock to beat him. That would be a legitimate reason for him to need a suit of armor to take him on. But setting all of that aside, why don't we play a game called Count the Reasons? It's a fun game to play when someone strongly insists that there's not a single good reason for something. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 since he has the anti-serum, which makes it even more important to ensure that you beat him.
The doctor said you still have 14 broken bones.
Okay, so that brings us to 6, 7, 19 in total. And considering the 5 supervillains who were giving him a hard time beforehand, that adds up to 20, 21, 24 good reasons for why he'd need the Anti-Ock suit. And I really don't know why anyone is complaining. The suit is genuinely cool, and the design is a practical counter to Doc Ock's arms, considering the armor plating is constructed in a similar manner. And it has a really cool introduction. Just look at this.
Ah, this is so cool.
I don't know. I can't see how anyone could get mad at that.
Well, to each his own.
I also find it strange that Insomniac is being singled out for this, when one of the most popular Spider-Man stories outside of the comics literally has Spider-Man lose most of his fights to Doc Ock. He doesn't even win a direct fight with him until the end, which is really because Peter got lucky. And that's not me complaining at all. Tobey's Spider-Man is great in this movie, and it's good that he's struggling against Doc Ock. I'd want him to struggle because Doc Ock is one of Spider-Man's greatest villains and is not just some thief of the week. All of what I'm saying here applies to the Insomniac version as well, but apparently that's fine because Tobey lost his powers and had to regain them?
What? What are you talking about?
I don't see why Spider-Man having quit beforehand is relevant, since this is never shown to be a detriment to his fighting style. If anything, his newfound motivation to be Spider-Man is enhancing his performance. Peter was performing so well that Doc Ock felt the need to get him to stop an entire train just to tire him out. So I guess Spider-Man being tired out is a good excuse, but not him literally having 14 broken bones and being fatigued by other supervillains?
That makes no sense.
Now I think Spider-Dunk made a great point here by outlining that Spider-Man had to make a suit to beat Electro, but no one seems to be complaining about that. The main counter I've seen to that is that Electro had a power-up, so therefore Peter was justified in needing one himself. But like I said earlier, part of Doc Ock's plan was to weaken Peter so he's less capable of fighting back, resulting in his 14 broken bones. So functionally and relatively speaking, Doc Ock is benefiting from a power-up. He made Spider-Man depowered so it's easier to beat him if he retaliates. So this is a bit of a fun example I've seen as well. Let's talk about your favorite topic, Edge of Time. That is one of the best Pete deaths I've ever seen. Anti-Venom is a counter to Peter's powers. Peter was kicking ass but loses because he got cocky. In character, that is a good way for Peter to lose, not whatever Insomniac did. Okay, let's compare the way Peter lost in Edge of Time and see if that makes any sense in comparison. This is referring to the fight that Peter has with Anti-Venom.
He can't, trust me.
Oh yeah, I always trust people who are trying to kill me. So you're the head lunatic. Well, we haven't been properly introduced. I'm the guy who's gonna stop your plans.
So instead of just webbing him up and preventing him from using his mind control device, he stops to talk and just stands there. Not exactly a great start. Now the fight doesn't begin straight away because Eddie is still resisting Sloane's mind control chip, and Peter can clearly see this.
Good luck with that. Anti-Venom, finish him.
Can't.
Impressive resistance, but activating all the control chips, releasing your more bestial side, should do the trick.
So, instead of, webbing up the guy who was using mind control against Anti-Venom, he literally just stands there, even when he knows Anti-Venom won't come after him, because he's too busy struggling with himself. And while he's just standing there, he listens to Sloane monologue and watches him use the mind control device to make it harder for Eddie to resist.
Good job.
And this is apparently the better version of Spider-Man taking a defeat? Well, okay, does it at least get any better? Well, no, because once Peter webs Anti-Venom, and he seems to be possibly down temporarily, he decides to walk over to the area, and even while Anti-Venom is making loud growling noises, which means Peter should know that he's still awake and possibly hiding somewhere. He'd know this is dangerous because...
How dangerous is this guy? He drains my powers on contact, and he's invisible to my spider sense. Terrific.
So Anti-Venom could easily just sneak around and go after him as a result of Peter closing the distance on him, which is exactly what happens because Peter chose to walk around here just to see if he's down for the count, which doesn't even make sense because Peter literally hears him growling, which strongly implies that he's still active.
Okay.
Like, what did Peter think was happening? Since when was a big monster growling ever a sign of, oh yeah, I'm down for the count, I give up? Like, that's such a random conclusion he comes to. Instead of closing the distance on Anti-Venom and walking into the most obvious trap ever, He could have just gone to Sloan immediately, who's still there, and disabled his mind control device. How does this make him look any smarter? How is this any better than what Insomniac did? If anything, this just makes Peter look really dumb, so I don't know how this is possibly a better example of how to make Spider-Man lose a fight. With Insomniac's version, his plan actually made a lot of sense. He made a suit specifically designed to counter Doc Ock, which would actually give him more of a justification to close the distance if there's a chance to overpower him. He first approaches the hostage situation cautiously, so that he's ready to save Norman when Otto presumably drops him. He then tries to reason with Otto to get the anti-serum. He does this both because he wants to reach Otto's humanity, and because a fight with Otto risks the safety of the anti-serum. So he at least wants to find a way to have Otto willingly give it up. And in the fight, Peter doesn't just close the distance all the time. He specifically tries damaging Otto's arms to slow them down, and once he does that, he tries crawling around him to reach his neural device. This is a good plan, and it only fails because Otto added an extra layer of security just in case Peter tried this. So Peter only ends up failing in this instance because Otto was intelligent as well, resulting in him getting his web shooters crushed. And when that happens, Peter is constantly trying to keep his distance until he has a clear and open opportunity to jump on Otto and try breaking one of his arms. There's actually more of a practical purpose behind his decisions and how he uses the suit. I think a great moment is when Peter is struggling against Otto's arm, but allows him to get stabbed even more to play on Otto's confidence that he has Peter beat here. If Otto thinks he has Peter beat right now, he never would have expected Peter to stab himself more just to reach his neural device, which is exactly why Peter would go with that kind of plan. He's forcing Otto to underestimate him here. There's also the fact that Otto perceives Peter as someone who's incapable of making the hardest decisions. And Peter's reaction in the moment is not only to state that he agrees with what Otto said, but he also shows this through his actions to Otto's surprise.
If you want to change the world, you have to be the kind of man who can make the hardest decisions.
I couldn't agree more.
I really don't see how the Anti-Ock suit does any damage to Spider-Man's character or even ruins any element of it. It's a reflection of Peter's ability to adapt and find creative solutions to his problems, and when he does actually use it, his decisions are actually clever. With that said, I have nothing more to add. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to watch some of my other videos and subscribe if you enjoy them. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.